What do you think then, or what advice, sorry, would you give someone who has done the work, but they've entered a relationship with someone who still needs to have work done because they see some of these behaviors that are not conducive to a healthy relationship?
That's a great question, and this is such a delicate territory. I'll tell you, I come across this all the time. Like I would coach somebody, and I have an example. I just spoke with somebody a couple of days ago. I coached her last year. She did an amazing work. Uh, she worked hard on developing new skills, learning how to communicate, learn how to verbalize her own needs, emotions, because she was quite an avoider. She spent quite a bit of time in an abusive, toxic marriage for many years. She got into a relationship and nice guy, but as she's sharing with me, I'm like, he is not prioritizing you, and you are not pushing hard enough to define the relationship. And she's like, yeah, I'll talk maybe next week, maybe next week. I'll ask him. So my advice is when you have done the work, but you're with the person where there is something, there is a potential, there is a click, you feel good, but there's still some things that are missing. My advice is to have an honest conversation and ask questions to understand whether that person actually understands that relationship require work. And if the person does not, the other person does not have to be exactly on the same level, aligned with our level of growth and awareness, but the willingness to do the work has to be there. Because if there is no willingness to do the work, even if you're on different levels, then there is nothing you can co-create, because otherwise it's just going to be completely one-sided. You're going to be pulling weight for two people, and the other one's just going to enjoy the ride.
How does the person who's doing the work get impacted by their partner who doesn't want to do the work when it comes to the growth of that relationship and maybe the longevity of it?
Well, then I think that would depend on the person. Those that are more resilient, they will take it as a learning lesson and opportunity to evolve even more, opportunity to get some more wisdom. If they're not extremely hyper vigilant, if they not they if they don't have the tendency to catastrophize, and I would assume somebody who have done some work, they had worked on their certain sabotaging behaviors and certain mindset shift. So the impact would depend of how strong you feel about yourself. I guess we're returning back to that sense of identity and healthy sense of self. Seems like everything just revolves around there, because if the foundation is not there, if you don't feel grounded in who you are, even though growth is needed continuously, then everything else will be much more challenging, close to impossible to achieve.
Yeah, you put the person, both parties actually, in a difficult situation because you may, and I've seen this where one person is growing at a rate that unfortunately is outpacing their partner. So now there's the gap is widening and widening, right? And I sometimes think once that person realizes it, because maybe when you're in the beginning, you don't see it, but once you start to understand, okay, I'm outgrowing my partner, and you identify that there's a gap, you have a choice at that point, right? Do you continue to grow and that gap widens? Because you only can control what you can control. Or, and I've seen some coaches tell me, the person will stop. They're like, you know what? I don't want to continue to grow because I'm leaving my partner behind. And if I leave them behind emotionally, I may have to leave them behind when it comes to the relationship. Do you see some people maybe stop their progress, their healing, their growth because they don't want to maybe separate from their partner, which maybe they think eventually will happen?
I have not seen it, at least not in the form that you had presented, but it's absolutely possible that gap will be widening and widening. But if somebody decides to stop, that means that you're not being true to yourself anymore. Because if you're doing that for another person, that means that you are giving up on yourself. And for what reason? If you feel you need to give up on yourself in order to please, quote unquote, the other person's lack of growth, then that's not healthy relationship. And what you're describing, this is, you just described me essentially. You described my second marriage. I got married, I had not done any work on myself. And then when I had my kids, this is where I realized I need help. And that's where I started seeking therapy and I started working on myself. I created momentum. And I invited my then husband into the process of learning together, growing together, changing, because I was doing pretty well with my growth and it was exciting. He refused. He refused once, he refused twice, and I had to make that decision. Well, here I am. I outgrown my relationship. We used to be a match. We no longer a match. And I left. And I left the relationship because there was absolutely no willingness on his part to come even closer to where I was inviting him to come as far as the growth.
I wonder if that's maybe one of the reasons why people dislike us so much.
Could be.
Could be, right? Because you sit down with someone, you point out what isn't working in a relationship or what is working, but from the conversation you and I have, it's self-realization. We don't tell them, oh, you know what, Johnny's bad or Jane is bad or Johnny is good. We don't tell them that. We help them come to their own conclusions. And when they realize, like, wow, I've been actually allowing this type of behavior all these years. Once they see clearly now that the rain is gone, right? They can't unsee it anymore. Do you find maybe that to be difficult? Maybe not with the people you work with, if it does happen, but us in general, where people, when someone sees what is wrong, and they're like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna put that back into the closet, close the door, and pretend that it isn't there.
People do it all the time. People do it all the time. I did that too. I was so good at convincing myself. I was extremely good at pretending nothing bad was happening, nothing unhealthy was happening. But I kept taking it out of the closet, looking at it, it's like, nope, not ready, put it back in the closet. And if I'm being extremely honest, it took me probably at least 7, 8 years to get to the point where I finally exited that relationship. But I'm only able to do it now when I'm this smart, having learned from all my relationship struggles and mistakes to look back and connect the dots. But back then it was different. Back then I didn't feel the confidence that I feel now. I couldn't just walk away easily. So it's painful for people. It's painful to see that clearly. And we don't want to see because we don't want to change anything because we want things to stay familiar to us. Unknown is scary as hell. So some people will keep that stuff in the closet forever and ever. And I have people, they schedule a complimentary coaching call with me, and I dedicate an hour just to learn their life story and see how I can guide them. And most people, they do proceed with coaching, but there are always somebody who will listen to me and I can see they're getting clarity, but they don't like it and they will not contact me again.